Good morning, Opening Pathways viewers. This is Tom LeNoble. It's good to have you with me again. Today I have a special guest for you, Patricia Stepler, and she is the owner of Creating Top Producers. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm really ready to dig in and find out what that's about. Welcome to the show, Patricia.
Well, thank you, Tom, for inviting me.
I'm thrilled to have you. Please tell the viewers, and I want to know as well, a little bit about yourself and your business. And most importantly, I want to know what sparked your idea to start it.
So, my son actually helped me to spark the idea to start my business. My son, when he was 12, told me that he was going to get a full college scholarship, to which I never believed him. And he said he was going to be a collegiate athlete. And while he did have talent, I also knew at 12 years age, a lot can happen before you graduate from high school. And he just kept believing that. And I just allowed him to have his fantasy, as I called it. And lo and behold, he ended up getting a full college scholarship to college. And he, went in as a collegiate baseball player. And, it shouldn't have happened. They told us we could expect maybe a third to half at the most. And when he did that, I was like, I know he did this. I know he created this. I don't know how. And so that sent me on my own little journey to figure it all out. And then I decided to start my own business to help other people to realize what we have inside of us, the potential to do when we actually utilize the powers that we have in our mind to create the life that we want.
Yeah, out of the mouth of babes, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes, I think I know today I spend a lot of time with younger generations, and I find it so refreshing and rewarding. And if we're just open, I know for me, I always learn something, which is the best part about it. So that's a great story. Tell me something. What point on this journey did you know and say to yourself, "This is my path"?
Well, that's a good question. I was looking for, I kept thinking there's got to be more to life than what I was doing. And at the time I was teaching school, and, I really spent those adult years raising my kids because I felt that was a very important job for a parent to be able to raise, three kids to be, you know, constructive adults in their lives, that's really important. And when my son, who was my third, went to college, it was like, okay, now it's my turn. I've raised these three kids and I felt like there's got to be something more that I can do. And because of, what he had accomplished, I was like, he's very special, but he's no more special than anybody else. And, everybody has potential inside of them that they don't realize. So it was really at that point that I was like, I got to get this message out to more people.
I love this. I love this. So, I want to go back a little bit because I'm a real believer that who we are today has so many factors in it, but one of them
Mhm.
is our early role models in life. Somebody set us on our journey. Who was that for you?
I think it was probably my grandfather. He was just a very special person. And not that my parents weren't also, but my one grandfather, he just had this humor about him and just always very positive and encouraging. And I would guess he was probably the one person that, really impacted my life.
Yeah, I love it. I ask this question a lot, and it's typically either a parent or a grandparent, and occasionally somebody else that just was really heavily influenced our lives. I love this of how people have such an impact when we're young. So tell me, you've been on this journey. Did you ever doubt your vision?
Oh, yeah. That's
Oh,
easy to do when things don't go right. And, that happens to everybody because the path to success is never a straight line. And so there's always going to be times when you wonder or you doubt whether you can accomplish something. And, that's just so common because what happens today is we often see people when they've reached the top and they're successful. And we think that they're lucky or that, everything just went their way. But I don't know anybody when you really start to talk to them that they didn't have doubts, that they didn't wonder at times. Even my son, as he was accomplishing things along the way, he had disappointments and discouragements, but you have to keep that focus to the goal.
Interesting. If somebody was watching you now that knew you from back in the early days, what would surprise them most about Patricia today?
I think that I have more confidence.
Tell
Yeah,
us about
it's I was always a really shy person. From the time I was a child, really, I was very, very shy. I was afraid of being wrong. And I think part of that was I had a brother who was brilliant. And, the emphasis back when I grew up was always on the male child. And, that was the focus for my parents. He was a year older than I, and that's just the way it was. And so he was bright, and I always thought my parents as being really outgoing and bright people. And then I felt like, well, who am I? Because I think we always tend to think less of ourselves than we do of others around us. And so I was just very shy and, always was living in somebody else's shadow. And I think that's probably it. Even when I started to work, um, I had a principal who wanted me to be a team leader. And I thought, are you nuts? I didn't feel like a leader. And then I looked at my team and I was the youngest one, the least experienced. And I thought, why would you want me to be the team leader? And, a lot of times we don't see in ourselves what other people see in us.
It's true.
And so I would think that is it, the confidence, that, I believe I can do whatever I set out to do, but I didn't always feel that way.
Yeah, I love these stories of when we had those early experiences in school. I know early
Yeah.
on in grammar school, I won't say I was always in trouble, but I was always getting into something. I was always stirring something up. And it finally
Yeah.
got to fourth grade. And I remember my fourth grade teacher realized I was just bored.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we had this little door that went outside and there was a little garden out there. So when I would finish my work, she would let me go out to this garden and work in the garden. And it just shifted everything for me
Mhm.
because it gave me a purpose, I think, even at that young age. So I love these stories. Tell me, what did the early days in this business you have teach you about trust?
Well, it taught me that you really have to find people to trust because early on, I was listening. I'm not saying that they weren't trustful, but you have to know, you have to know who you are and what you really need. And I think early on in my business, I would just get from one thing to another, trying to find the answers of to how to build a business and to who to go to. And I think I found my most trust when I um, worked with a group of local business owners because I could develop that relationship. And I think that makes a huge difference. When you build a relationship, then you have more to go on, and then you can read a person better and figure out if they're trustworthy and, not just becoming somebody's client because maybe they feel that they can sell you something. And so I felt like a lot of times I was sold things that
I
maybe
see.
weren't necessarily the right thing for me.
Yeah. Tell me this. What personal values does Patricia live by?
The biggest one is integrity. I want to be a person of integrity. And, to me, that just means that you are trustworthy and that you're going to do what you tell somebody else that you're going to do. There's nothing that really annoys me more than when somebody says they're going to do something and they don't. So, that's a big thing for me. If you're going to say you're going to do something, then by golly, figure it out and do it.
Yes, integrity is a pillar in my life as well. I
Mhm.
appreciate that more than I can tell you, Patricia. So tell me, you've been on this journey. What have you learned about leadership?
That leaders really have to be good listeners, and they really have to understand other people and take time to understand them and realize that there are different perspectives. And just because you may have an idea of how you think something should work, that doesn't necessarily mean it's the right way or that there aren't some other really good ideas out there. And so I think for leaders, they really have to listen and realize that people bring a lot to the table, and they bring various experiences and backgrounds. And so that's really important to realize and to pick up on their strengths and to learn to, to get to know the people that you're leading.
Yes, tell me more about balancing being a leader versus a learner.
I think you have to be both. I think leaders are good followers, and you have to be a good follower in order to be a good leader. And there are times that you need to lead, and there are times that you need to follow. Even if you're a really good leader, you might be in another group or with another, group of people, and all of a sudden you become the follower and you're supporting instead of leading. So I think there's times that we have to realize that we're not always the leader.
Got it. Got it. Great. Great. So tell me this. Tell me about a risky decision you had to make, and it paid off, and what gave you the courage to act to make it happen.
I think a risky decision I had to make was to actually go after my first sale. And that was very scary at the time because I really didn't know what I was doing. And, to actually approach these people and sit down and talk to them and become their mentor and, being willing to share with them what I knew. And at the time, I was not sure if what I was going to offer them was going to work. And, that was probably the scariest thing. And it paid off marvelously, especially for them, because they just had so much success by listening to me. And so again, that gave me more confidence that what I was sharing with them actually worked.
I love this. Along my journey, I have found that some of my biggest mistakes turned out to be some of my biggest successes in the long run.
Mhm.
And the journey taught me that, in fact, to shift my perception of mistakes into something that's an
Absolutely.
opportunity to grow. Have you ever made a mistake or had a
Oh,
mistake that
yeah.
taught you more than another success did?
Yes. So and this goes back to my teaching career. I was put in a leadership position, and it was to really take our school and to help us become almost like a charter school. We were not a charter school, but it was moving the emphasis away from the central office and giving us more power amongst ourselves. And so I was getting this specialized training in how to do that and how to move the school forward. Only, when teachers get really busy and in their classroom, they tend to focus on that and not on the reform that we were trying to do. And so my frustration was to just kind of steamroll it, and you cannot steamroll. And so by the end of that school year, I had pretty much alienated everybody in the staff. And I even went that summer to ask my principal if he would help me to get a transfer to a different school. And he said, I'll do what you want me to do, but if I help you get a transfer, he said, then this whole reform will end, because I was the only one that was really trying to move it forward. And so he said it would hurt the children. Well, that was like pulling at my heartstrings. So I decided to stay. And he said to me, he said, I think you're going to be in charge of the school improvement team. And I just laughed because I said, these people do not like me. There's no way, because that was a voted position. And he said, no, he says, I think that will happen. He says, you just got to learn to deal with people differently. And so I took that to heart. I studied, I learned some things, how to deal with people went back in and I started to instead of alienate the staff, get them on my side and pull them and find their strengths and what they were willing to do to help. And sure enough, by the end of that year, I was elected the facilitator for the school improvement team. And I was starting to make forward progress in a way. And as devastating as that was, because it's really hard for me to realize that people did not like me and the way they, I had alienated everybody. And that was very tough emotionally for me. But if I had to get through that all again, I would in a heartbeat because of the growth that I had in myself and the growth that came out of the leadership skills with
Yeah.
that. It was tremendous.
What this story has multiple points of wisdom that, but not only about mistakes and how they can turn into successes, but I think sometimes we look and think that maybe we just go around this and we'll just, go around and keep going, as opposed to, I believe, the only way to the other side is through.
Mhm.
And sometimes it's hard to do that, but it usually, or at least I found, turns out to be the best thing. Thank you for that story. Tell me, what impact are you most proud of? And I'm interested in it personally, not professionally.
I think just seeing people change and seeing people grow, into somebody that maybe they didn't even think they could become. And that's just really exciting to me to see. And it's not just even the people that I work with as clients, but just, in interactions with people, that you interact with maybe frequently, just seeing how you can impact somebody's life just by showing some kindness and encouragement
The
and
best.
maybe helping them to understand. It's just it just makes a difference.
Yeah, it's the best to be able to be part of something like that and not even go into it with any of that in mind, but have learn later that you really made an impact is so rewarding, I think. I'm interested to know, have you ever said no to growth because it wasn't aligned?
Yes, I think I probably have. Yes. I've had some opportunities to be part of, learning maybe a different modality. Um, and I've said no to it because it just didn't feel right for me. So, in those cases, I don't say no to too many things when it comes to personal growth because I do like to expand my knowledge base, even if it's not something that I'm actually going to utilize. But there are some things that, just don't feel quite right to me.
I see. All right, I need to know, what's the boldest vision for your organization in the next 5 years?
I would like to take my business into more companies so I can make a greater impact. Currently, I deal with more the individuals or even just a small group, but I would really like to impact an entire company so that I can see the growth that can happen when you get more people understanding how to utilize and their minds and how to unlock their potential.
Well, you just put that out there, and I suspect it's going to be coming to you. I have a question for you. Another one is, I'm interested to know, is there like, if the resources weren't a restraint at all, you just take that off the table, you had all the resources in the world to do whatever you wanted, what wild idea would you go after?
Oh, so that's easy. I want to do a world cruise where I'm taking clients with me and, just spending the time traveling as well as learning. So that if I had all the resources, that's what I would do.
Yeah, I love this. I love this. I heard a story recently from someone who I as is a mentor to me, and we were talking about one of the first times she put on a big course, and it was a big deal. They picked a location, and
Mhm.
everybody had to travel there. It was a week long, and there's the biting the nails. Is anybody going to come, or we're going to have anybody? And one of her mentors was just like, you just got to do this. You just got to stick with it and trust that you're going to put the work in and people are going to show up. And hearing the story of how that felt, and then of course the story of people did show up. In fact, they were overbooked, and how that turned out was great. It was a great lesson for me about some of these things we dream of doing. Sometimes we just have to jump in and go do them, right?
Right.
Uh,
Absolutely.
what what's going on in our culture today that lights you up?
I think, I've seen a lot of young people. I'm talking like 20s that are just entrepreneurs and they just have an idea and they go out there and do it. And it's just so refreshing to see, the success that they can have with that. And I think that's every time I see a story about that on the news, I just love it because
Me
they're
too.
just out there doing it.
I'm very fortunate. I've been able to work with different generations in my career, and I've been doing quite a bit of work with Gen Z, and I just love allowing their ideas to bubble up and hear where they're going and what they're thinking. And I usually almost always leave with the thought to myself, I think we're going to be okay after all, with all the
Yeah.
madness that's going on. Tell me this. What are you most hopeful for in the world today?
I would really like to see people just getting along with each other. I've never understood why different cultures or different religions, why we just can't get along. We can all have our own beliefs. And, I've just never understood how you can argue with people and get to the point where you just dislike them so much that you'd fight them. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, yeah. We could use a little unity in a lot of things right now.
Absolutely.
And a little kindness. I think we could all
Yes.
focus on being a little more kind and remember we're all more the same than we'll ever be different.
Mhm.
I'm curious. I have people that watch this podcast that will hear your story and be thinking about starting out on a journey, maybe being a founder or something, or owning something, or starting something new, and maybe even one of those Gen Zers. I'm hearing they're calling themselves Zoomers now, which I love. Uh, so tell me, what words of wisdom would you give somebody that was starting out on a path of blazing a trail on their own and starting something they've always had a passion about?
Go ahead and do it. And realize that one thing I want them to keep in mind is you can never outperform the image you hold of yourself. So you have to see yourself and believe yourself to be capable of accomplishing that goal. Because until you do, you're not going to, have that energy and that enthusiasm to go after it. So you
Yeah.
really have to build it in your mind first.
Yeah. Viewers, you know how I say there's a rewind moment right there. Back it up about 10 seconds and listen to what Patricia just shared. That was some wise wisdom about how we view these things. I have one more question for you today. If your younger self were watching this podcast, what would you tell her?
I would tell her, go ahead and get a coach earlier on. I had the opportunity when I was in my 20s and early 30s to hire somebody to help me, and I did not do it because I said, oh, I can't afford it. What would I do? Because I was so locked in to my education and, being on a pay schedule. I didn't think outside the box. So, hire somebody. Don't hold off on that because
Uh,
that was the biggest mistake I think I ever made.
I love this, Patricia. I had somebody ask me, I forget often, but somebody was really emphatic one day about asking me this question of, does a coach have a coach?
Mhm.
And I thought for a moment about how I was going to respond to that because to me as a coach, it seems so obvious, right? That you'd have
Right.
a coach. So my answer was, does a dentist fill their own cavities? Of course if we're coaches and we're dedicated to what we do, we're going to have a coach. I know I have two or three of them
Mhm.
going at one time that I utilize. So what a delight it's been to have you on Opening Pathways today's Patricia. Patricia, please tell the viewers who you are, about your company, and how they might find you.
Yes, so I'm Patricia Stepler, and my company is Creating Top Producers, and you can find me at creatingtopproducers.com. Um, and you can connect with me on LinkedIn or Facebook. So those are great ways to make that connection and reach out to me.
Wonderful. Thank you for being on Opening Pathways today, Patricia.
Thank you.
And to my viewers, this is Tom LeNoble, and I'll see you next time.